Muchas gracias.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter.
Great on what I have to say. As I said this morning, we had three main items in the agenda. The first one was the situation in Gaza, the second one, Ukraine, and the third one, Armenia and Azerbaijan. We started our discussion with the situation in the conflict between Palestine and Israel, and the fight in Gaza, and we had a look at that from all dimensions of the problem. To tell the truth, the fact that yesterday, after intense working during the whole day, we managed to approve a statement at the 27 member states, a unanimous statement, facilitated the discussion today. Sí, ayer, durante todo el día.
So yesterday, all day long, there was intense exchanges between all member states, especially after the conference in Paris on the invitation of France to gather humanitarian aid for Gaza. So declarations were made, of course, by the President of the French Republic, and various member states asked me to launch a new attempt to get approval for a statement, a communiqué, which could be adopted by all 27 member states. So that's what we did. And by the end of the process, we got a common position assessing the humanitarian situation on the ground and calling for, and this is the new element, immediate humanitarian pauses in hostilities and the opening of humanitarian corridors. The new element is immediate, the use of the term immediate, because the call for pauses in the plural has been made before by the European Council and the G7, indeed, subsequently. But the new element is that because of the humanitarian situation, these humanitarian pauses are deemed to be urgent, and we require them immediately, according to the statement. So there is a need to open humanitarian corridors as well to ensure that assistance reaches civilians in Gaza. To achieve that, today we had Commissioner Lenarčič with us, who is in charge of humanitarian aid, and he explained, well, something that, of course, everybody knows from the press, but he gave us a more technical assessment of the impact of the intense bombing in Gaza, which has led to more than 11,000 deaths, including high numbers of women and children. At the same time, there is an acute lack of the most basic necessities, from water to medicine and food. There is 1.5 million of displaced people within Gaza, and many more are moving south from the north, according to the indications we're receiving from the Israeli armed forces. But there are hundreds of thousands still in northern Gaza, where it is much harder to get humanitarian aid through. Some aid has penetrated, the Commissioner explained to us, but we are talking about 40 lorries a day on average from the Rafah crossing, and that's very little compared to the 500 lorries crossing before the war. The United Nations is highlighting the lack of food. Less than 10% of what is necessary is getting through. Also very worrying is the situation in the hospitals. Many have simply collapsed or are on the brink of collapse. 20 of the 35 hospitals in Gaza, according to the WHO, have ceased to function. They are without fuel, and without fuel they cannot function because they cannot avail themselves of clean water or electricity. Now, given that situation, the Commission and the EU more broadly have increased humanitarian aid. President von der Leyen has shown concern for the fate of Gazan civilians, and we have increased the budget up to 100 million. But that aid has to reach its destination. There's no point providing it if the lorries can't cross into Gaza. So an air bridge is functioning to airfields close to the border, and medicine and food is reaching those airfields, but it cannot yet get into Gaza. So that humanitarian situation was addressed by the ministers, and in particular the situation of the hospitals when we examined the statement made public yesterday. We also expressed our concern over the use of people as human shields in order to bring pressure to bear. We still are not seeing the necessary number of lorries crossing into Gaza. There has to be more transit capacity. That could be done by opening more land crossings. The ones that exist are closed. Or we could look at the Cypriot initiative for a maritime corridor. But there are no ports on the Gazan coast. So in order to disembark with the aid, you need to create the necessary jetties, and that is what is now being looked at. Yesterday, we also called, of course, for the liberation of the hostages. We also insisted that we need unconditional release of those persons, and the Red Cross should be given access to them. That was the point, those were the points covered by our communication yesterday. The other thing, of course, is how we can avoid escalation and the extension of this conflict to other neighboring regions around Israel. We continue to pass the message on to any players we can. We need to particularly pay attention to the situation with Hezbollah on the northern Israeli border with Lebanon. Looking, however, forward, we need to focus on a medium and longer term solution, a post-conflict scenario that can guarantee stability on an ongoing basis, that will make it possible to build a peace between Palestinians and Israelis and throughout the region. This dramatic crisis we are living through, and its incredibly high cost in terms of lives, Israeli and Palestinian lives, shows that there is a failure politically and morally at the international community. We have failed to find a solution for this situation, and this has now to be an occasion that makes people realize that a solution is absolutely indispensable, and there has to be a two-state future. It's not just about reconstructing Gaza. We've done that several times before. We have to construct a state for the Palestinians. That means that we have to look at the day after. even though the Arab states don't want to talk about that now. They want to talk about today. They want to talk about what's going on now. At the meeting in Riyadh, for example, that was clear. We need, of course, a set of parameters to work with in looking at a solution for peace. I proposed today to the ministers a sort of framework which would involve establishing some conditions first, and the ministers, I think, were supportive of that approach. We would need to work on it immediately in collaboration with the United States and Arab states. I would say there are 3 yeses and 3 noes. The 3 noes are, firstly, that we cannot have forced displacement of the Palestinian people outside Gaza. We can't have an expulsion of those people, an expulsion of Palestinians, hoping they will be hosted somewhere else. So no forced displacement of Palestinian people outside Gaza. The second no would be that you cannot have a reduction of Gazan territory. So there cannot be an occupation of Gaza by Israel. No territorial change or reduction of Gazan territory. No to the reoccupation by the Israeli Defense Forces in a permanent situation. No to the return of Hamas to Gaza either.
Gaza cannot be dissociated from the overall Palestinian issue. La solución para Gaza tiene que marcar.
So the situation for Gaza has to be part of the overall solution for the Palestinians. Now, the various players have to commit themselves to finding solutions, and therefore we think that there has to be yes to a Palestinian Authority, one Palestinian Authority.
The Palestinian Authority. Una autoridad palestina en...
So a Palestinian Authority with a legitimacy to be defined and decided upon by the Security Council. That authority will have to have strong support, however. So that's the second yes. Yes to a stronger involvement of the Arab countries in looking for a solution. I know that the Arab states are now saying they don't want to talk about the day after because they're focused on today, on the drama playing out in Gaza. But there will be no solution without strong commitment from the Arab states, and that cannot be limited to money. They can't just pay for reconstruction, for a physical reconstruction. There has to be a political contribution to the construction of a Palestinian state. And the third yes is greater involvement of the EU in the region, and in particular in the involvement in the construction of a Palestinian state. We have been far too absent. We have delegated the solution of this problem to the United States. But now Europe must become more involved. We must commit ourselves to this process, because if we don't find a solution, we will experience a perpetual cycle of violence, moving from generation to generation, from funeral to funeral. So to work on this political momentum, there will be a visit. I will be visiting Israel and Palestine and Bahrain in the next few days, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Jordan. So that's on the first point.
In Gaza, we are not losing sight of what is happening in Ukraine. And Ukraine remains high in our agenda. We heard again Minister Kuleba. He told us about the current priorities and needs ahead of the winter. We know that Putin is again trying to weaponize hunger and winter, cold and food, increasingly targeting the energy and export infrastructure of Ukraine, with damaging consequences not only for Ukraine but the whole world. And we have to continue our support to Ukraine. Putin believes democracies are weak, public opinion system, which not the case of Russia, will give up the first. And we have to show him that is not going to be the case. We remain committed to rebuild and reform and to support Ukraine on joining the European Union. The European Commission provided a positive recommendation last week to the Council in order to ask for the opening of negotiation with Ukraine, which is the speediest, the quickest way of advancing a country towards membership, since the request to the consideration of Ukraine as a candidate and opening negotiations. We discussed our military support and security commitments. You know that I have been tasked by the European leaders on the last European Union Council to build a security commitment from the European Union to Ukraine. We are working on that with the member states. At the beginning of the month, we will send a mission to Ukraine to discuss our proposal with the Ukrainians. If I could go, I will be very happy to go, but in any case, my Under Secretary General for Security and Defense issue will go to Ukraine, presenting the proposal that the member states are still discussing. It will include, certainly, a proposed European peace facility dedicated envelope, and this will be presented to the European Union Council by the end of the year in December. In the meantime, we continue the training of the Ukrainian soldiers. We are already on 30,000, which is 10,000 more that we plan to do. Another priority is the peace formula, the only proposal for a just and sustainable peace that is being discussed at international level. And also we are finalizing the work on the 12th package of sanctions. You know that the sanctions are, on one side, the personal sanctions, and on the other side, the economic and sectoral sanctions. But the way, once again, the word sanction doesn't exist in the treaty. We talk about restrictive measures. And I hope I will be able to present to the Council the proposal, because it's the Council who has to approve it, my proposal as High Representative, together with the proposal jointly with the Commission of the regulation needed to implement these sanctions or restrictive measures if the Council approves it. This 12 package will include more listening, new export bans, among them about diamonds, actions to tighten the oil price cap in order to decrease the revenue that Russia is getting from selling its oil, not to us but to others, fighting against circumvention, and, as I said, the ban on diamonds. We are finalizing the last details of this package. It will be composed by a Council decision approving the measures and a Council regulation giving guidelines to the member states in order to implement this decision. This Council regulation could be approved on Wednesday on a joint proposal by me and the Commission to the Council. And the third issue was Armenia-Azerbaijan. The October European Council discussed how to strengthen our cooperation with Armenia and support its democratically elected authorities, its resilience, its security, and the continuation of reforms in the country. We decided to beef up our mission in Armenia, more observers and more patrols in the sensitive areas of the border. And we will explore a possible support to Armenia under the European Peace Facility and options for a visa liberalization for Armenia. We have to be very much vigilant for any attempt of destabilization of Armenia, internally and externally. And our message to Azerbaijan has been clear. Any violation of Armenian territorial integrity will be unacceptable and would have severe consequences for the quality of our relations. We call for the resumption of negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan under the work done by the President of the Council. We need that a peace treaty could be concluded, and we are committed to continue our mediation role. We decided to invite the Armenian Foreign Minister to join us in the margin of the next Foreign Affairs Council, has to be decided, but the upcoming Foreign Affairs Council. And finally, not the less important thing, but maybe someone who is not on the headlines, we continue our climate diplomacy, receiving the COP28 President-designate Sultan Al-Jaber, and we have just issued a dedicated press release on this. We want that the United Nations Climate Conference be, in spite of the current geopolitical turmoil, a success on the existential fight against global warming and climate change. And now, after this meeting, this press point, I will go to have a ministerial conference with the Western Balkans and the European Union. And I can tell you that the Euro-Mediterranean Conference will take place in Barcelona by the end of the month.